Don Dickson, and I want to thank you for joining me this morning. It's been quite some time since we last talked, and I felt that I needed to get out here on the dock and give you an update about what's been going on down here at our household. And I'm sure, as everyone already knows, we've been suffering through a very unusual year, and pretty much the country's been shut down. And that includes shooting fishing vlogs for a variety of reasons, which I'm going to share with you today. But I do want to sort of bring you up to date on what's going on. I've had an awful lot of questions, especially lately. People wondering about my health and so on and so forth, and I felt it was necessary to at least give you an update on all of that and what's going on, and then what we're planning in the future. And I wanted to let you know that I'm still around. You know, there's been quite a few what do you call it, text messages or messages to my Instagram or messages to my website questioning whether or not it was true that I had passed away. Now, this is the second time that's happened, and I can assure you those reports of my early demise have been greatly exaggerated. And I think I've shared this with you before. Many of my subscribers have heard this before, but I come from a long line of long livers. They all live to be 100, 98, 99, 100. So I'm planning on going another 20 years anyhow. I mean, that's my plan. The Lord willing, that's my plan. So we're going to have a chance to talk an awful lot of fishing during that time, whatever my time is that's remaining. So I wanted to go over a couple of things before we get started, and then after I bring you up to date on some important things in the overall scope, some important things. Then we'll talk a little bit of fishing. Now, first, obviously the country's been shut down, and of all my years, and many of you know that's a lot of years I've been around, I've never seen anything like this. It's crazy. And I have some stories I'm going to tell you about how it's affected my life, our lives, and my family. And at the same time, I'm well aware that, you know, I think nearly 250,000 people have viewed our vlogs. And I'm sure there's thousands and thousands of stories as to how this virus has affected your family or people that you know. And so I don't mean to say, hey, look what's happened to us, like it hasn't happened to a bunch of people. And so many of my subscribers are at an age where their jobs have been cut off, and they're mainly spending most all of their time trying to find ways to stay alive and support their children, support their families, and so many serious situations that I can't even imagine what they might be just of my fishing friends. I can't even imagine it. So with all that being said, I'm going to tell you what happened to us. And then we'll move on a little bit later and talk a little bit about fishing. Now, I think it was Father's Day weekend, as I recall correctly. And my wife's not here this morning, so she would correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Father's Day weekend, because her brother had flown in from Wisconsin to do a little visit. And it was also the reopening of our church. And as many of you already know, my wife not only is she the music director, and of course that's her education, she's a music major, but she was also the media director of our church. And now that COVID's taken over and there is no church service at the sanctuary, it's all virtual, my wife is doing all of the virtual stuff, including having a virtual choir number every service, where she has choir members sending in videos as to a particular song, and then she puts it all together and creates a virtual anthem. So she's been working throughout this COVID. But our church was reopening on Father's Day weekend. And of course, everybody rushed to church and social distancing and all of the right things we're supposed to do. But there was one gal that came to church that Sunday morning that was baptizing her child. And it had been planned for months, of course, and a baby. And so the baptism went on, and during that, she was not wearing a mask. Well, long story short, it's nobody's fault, obviously, but long story short, about 2 days later, she was informed that someone at her job had the virus, and that all of the people there had been exposed, which she didn't know on Sunday morning. So she went to get tested, and of course, she tested positive. Well, you know, when you have a child that's being baptized, everybody afterwards, hugging up and, getting way too close to that situation. And it was about 4 days later that my mother-in-law, Allie's mom, who's 86, she probably wouldn't want me telling you that because she looks 66 and she runs around like she's 46. Social calendar is way full. But at any rate, she had a little runny nose and a little bit of a cough. So she decided that she'd go to urgent care. This was on a Sunday. She would go to urgent care and maybe get, some medication to make her well, what she thought was just a little cold. And at this time, the girl that had tested positive hadn't got her results yet, so nobody knew any of that. So when my mother-in-law gets to urgent care, they send her next door to the hospital to be tested for COVID. Sure enough, comes back, she's positive. She has the virus. And of course, that was a very scary time for all of us because she is 86, even though, nobody knows that until now. But goodness gracious, we were just scared to death, Now, there's a few different places in the Bible that reference that if two or more people come together and are asking God for the same thing, He hears it. And of course, we had a multitude of prayer warriors out there praying for my mother-in-law. And we, of course, all decided real quick we were all going to go get tested for the virus. So next day we go test, and they said, well, you have the info in 5 to 7 business days. No. We tested, and we didn't get those results for 16 days. But of course, we're assuming some stuff, so we decided we're definitely going to be quarantining ourselves, not doing anything. Now, my wife was still working, but she was working with the virtual side of this because the church had been closed down once they found out that we had an open service where people were at risk. So I can't try to make this long story short. We were waiting for the results, but in the interim, my wife started a little bit of a cough, and she had a bit of a runny nose, sort of like a sinus infection, which she would get from time to time. So she wasn't really worried, so to speak, worried. We're never worried. God's in charge of everything. We both believe that with all of our hearts. So, but concerned. And sure enough, we finally got the test back. Uncle Gary had gone and got his test. He was positive for the virus. And Allie's brother, Perry, he was positive up in, and he had flown home, of course, by then, up into Wisconsin. He was positive. And lastly, so was my wife. She had the virus. The only person that didn't have the virus was me. So for the next 2 weeks, as my wife's going through her medication and how they treated her and all of that, we stayed so far apart, sleeping in different rooms, and I did all the cooking, which I do a lot of anyhow. But, she just basically stayed away from me, except she would wipe down everything that she even sort of looked at crosswise. She was wiping it down and sterilizing everything nonstop. Sure enough, about 10 to 12 days later, she was well. So was my mother-in-law. So was my brother-in-law. Took Uncle Gary a little bit longer, but now He's well. And so over those 3 or 4 week period, it was very, very nerve-wracking for the Dickson family. And to be quite honest with you, I love all you folks that have been so kind in your comments about my efforts to come on and do vlogs and so on and so forth. I felt like I was letting everybody down, not getting out to do this on the water training and all of that. But in some cases, as many of you have already found out, there are other things that take precedent over catching a fish. And first in my book was my family, and making sure everybody was well, making sure that my sons were well. And my son is a department head for a supermarket chain, and he's been working through the pandemic. So, and my older boy, who's in the teaching business, he's been doing all his stuff virtual. So still, when your family's at risk and your friends are at risk, and my sister in Pittsburgh at risk, you're concerned. And the last thing on my mind really was fishing, even though I always, and my wife can verify this sometime to you later, that I always felt guilty that I wasn't sort of fulfilling what I had promised to do, which was make an on-the-water series of presentation of lures, all facets of successful fishing, because you can't find it anywhere else today. You can see all of the tournament stuff you ever want to see on YouTube. You don't need to look very hard to find somebody that's sitting in a big bass boat somewhere catching a bass. But to teach the young people the true facts, and some of the older people, the truth about successful fishing, all species, all times of year, there's no place for people to go find out anymore. So that's the reason I really want to put together this virtual, since I can't fish with everybody, on the water training series, which I am going to do. I give you my word, as long as the Lord is willing and I'm kicking, it's going to get finished. And one of the things I was able to do, which I want to announce to you today, it's already been announced a little bit on because my wife does this Facebook thing. I have a Facebook page because of her, but I don't really know how to do anything on Facebook. But she announced it on Facebook, and already been a bunch of sales, because now we charge a little something for it because we want to sort of make sure that we cover our expenses. But I promise you, we're not heading on a European vacation based on the proceeds of this thing. But during the pandemic, I had a bunch of questions, and I'm still getting them every day, about all Buck's material. And I brought along, I thought it'd be important to re-show you maybe. This was the original advanced course. And this is what I've had all these years. The pages are yellow and drawn on and written on. But it weighs about 15 or 20 pounds. It's a lot of information. And one of the things I was getting lots of during this downtime, and it's not only me it's down, I know most of you are down in many ways, that the concerns were, okay, there's all this information you want us to learn to be really successful. No, I want you to learn as much as you can learn. I read a book one time. I recommend it to everybody, by the way. It's called All You Can Do Is All You Can Do. But all you can do is enough. And I believe that's true in all walks of life. I really believe all of that. You know, some people have different talents than others. Everybody's given talent, but it's not all the same, fortunately. Because if that was true, we'd all be playing Major League Baseball. We'd all be playing, for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So there are different talents, and there are different levels of talent. There's different callings, and I believe in all of that, but I believe whenever you attack something, whether it's a sport, whether it's your business, whether it's a job, whether it's your family, whether it's your children, all you can do is all you can do. As long as you're working as hard as you can towards that end goal, all you can do is all you can do. But all you can do in the end is enough. And so I recommend that book, by the way. But as I started thinking about all these people calling in and saying, man, I've gone over to vlogs, I've re-listened to them sometimes 4 and 5 times to try to get all of the info I can so I can achieve my final goal, which is to go out there and become successful. Well, back in the 1990s, now we're going way back now, I created something in my mind. How could I take my overall goal, of course, is to simplify all Buck's material so that average people like myself and like most of you, you'll be able to get the message so that all you can do out there in the water is enough. In other words, you may not be at a professional level where you can say, I'm as good as Buck Perry, or I can probably outfish Don Dickson. You may not be at that level, but you may not have an interest in being that level. What most people want is just to be able to catch a few more fish and bigger fish. That's what most people want. They just want a little more success so they can enjoy their sport. And that's what I've always tried to accomplish over the years. Simplify it to a point where people can start catching more and bigger fish, be successful, take their kids fishing, enjoy the sport, and not be confounded and angry every time they come off the water because they didn't catch any fish. If you don't have some success at a sport or at an endeavor such as fishing or golf or anything like that, if you don't have some degree of success, you'll end up giving up the sport. You can't really truly enjoy it unless you have some success. So looking back on my career, that was the whole idea that I had, that if we take this genius scientist discoveries and try to explain it in lay terms. I think I mentioned one time that some really smart person said the true definition of genius is taking something that is complicated and making it simple. Take that which is complicated and make it understood by everyone. That would be the genius, to be able to do that. Well, I'm definitely not a genius, but that was my approach. Try to make it so that everybody can catch more and bigger fish, even if they don't, in the long run, have a goal of becoming a professional fisherman and earning a living at it. That's a different story. If you want to earn a living and be different in this game, you need to know everything that's in this book, and then you need to experience everything that's in this book. Well, most people, through their job, their family, through crises like we're involved with right now, they don't have time nor the desire to become a professional fisherman. They just want to catch some more fish. So in my attempt to simplify everything that I had learned from Buck over 35 years, I sat down and started writing. If I had to break all of this information down to its simplest form, what would it be? What would the answers be? And back in the 90s, I started working on that. Came up with the original idea for it. I handed it over to Buck. And I said, Buck, I want you to take a look at this. And I told him what my goal was. I want to get people catching more fish. I want to give them the minimum that they have to know and allow them to set up an approach. Every time they go out on the water, they have the same exact approach every time. And I want to know what has been left out of my writing. And he studied it for 2 weeks. And I kept asking him about it. He says, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Never gave me a direct answer. So I started worrying, that maybe I missed the mark on this. And one of the things I had taken care to do was I realized in all my years of teaching, running his schools and lectures and 2-day schools and week-long school, all of that, I realized that everybody I talked to, if I have a room full of 500 people, I have 500 different skill levels, 500 different levels of understanding, 500 different levels of learning. I can't just talk to 500 people in one way and make sure that I'm hitting everybody. It's hard to do. So with that in mind, when I put this deal together, I thought, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give some background to everything that I'm stating so that if someone is brand new, they at least will have enough, excuse me, they will at least have enough 101 information to explain what this step meant. So with that in mind, I'm talking to the beginner, I'm talking to the youngster, I'm talking to all the wives and girlfriends, I'm talking to mid-level successful fishermen, I'm talking to the best of the best, the cream of the crop. I want to make sure I hit everybody with my explanations. And I created what we call Don Dickson's Daily Guide to Fishing Success. It's bottom line an approach that encompasses everything I ever learned in 50 years of knowing buckbearing. Encompasses all of that and puts it into its simplest form. And finally, after about 2 weeks, I think it was about 2 weeks, Buck said, well, I've finished that writing and I don't think you've left anything out. Well, years later, now that I'm involved with the vlogs and reaching, the idea is I'm reaching a new group of fishermen. And the general idea going into it was to educate the new generation of fishermen who have no other place to get the info. But I can't start them on map and interpretation when they know nothing about the basic movements of fish. So the idea was that I wanted to be able to explain everything I talk about in its simplest form so you can go out and catch more and bigger fish. But I wanted it to be in a form that you would have an approach that every time you were going to a lake, whether it's a brand new lake, one that you always go to, whatever it is, you have an exact step-by-step approach as to what you need to do to be successful. Now, we always talk about this. A top-notch structure fisherman catches fish every day he goes out. Sure, there can be extreme conditions where you don't catch as many as you normally would, but to absolutely get skunked, where you don't catch any fish. In all my years of promoting, I don't think there were 5 times in over 30 years of promoting where the weather and everything was so bad that I didn't catch fish. 5 times out of 30-something years. I mean, and today I can't imagine going out and not catch a fish. But I have the same exact approach every time I go. And it doesn't matter whether I'm fishing for walleye, northern pike, muskie, white bass, stripers, smallmouth, largemouth. I'm always going about my fishing the same way. Now the beauty of this is when you have all Buck's information or when you have it in its simplified version, you can use the same exact approach and go catch bass and walleye and all the species I just mentioned. You don't change anything. Sure, there are little idiosyncrasies. I've talked about this in earlier vlogs of one species to the other. Walleye's a little bit slower fish than the bass, and those kind of things. You always have that stuff in your mind because you've done your studies, you've done your homework. But your approach on the water, and this is where the problem seems to be coming in. People write me and say, man, I love the vlogs. I've listened to them over and over and over, and I go out and I launch the boat. And when I launch the boat, I look at all that water out there and say, okay, what do I do first? Well, it doesn't do you any good to have all the information if you don't know what to do first. So I've worked that and modernized it to a point where this is a fail-safe approach to going fishing each and every day and catching fish. Every day. And if you follow it and you study it, pretty soon it'll be like it did for me. It will become automatic. You no longer need to look at your daily guide. You already know what it is. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. And you go out there and you execute and you catch fish. So all that being said, while I'm sitting around doing nothing, waiting for all these test results. By the way, I think I mentioned we had to wait for our test results like something like 16 or 17 days before we found out. First, my wife had it and everybody else had it, but I didn't. And then when it came time to recheck after they all got well, they went to the new thing where in 15 minutes they get the answer. So they're all clear, so I'm going to put my wife back to work. But one of the reasons I haven't been able to do, there's a couple of reasons why I haven't been able to shoot the videos that I want to shoot. Allie, as you know, is my media gal, and she's been so busy putting together these virtual Sundays, not only the music, but all of the media. She's in charge of it all. So she's working, even though she's working at home, she's working a lot harder, really, than she normally would. And it takes her away from being able to do what I want to do, even though she already worked 20 hours a day and wouldn't complain. But at the same time, I have to be respectful of she's got to do a job. And we're going to get these videos done. And here's my thinking of all of it. Coming up with a written daily guide where you can read all the reasons for and all of the most important things you need to do every day you go fishing. It's all in written form now. And it's in the form of an ebook, which you're going to be able to download on your computer. Now, in addition to that, and people were just talking last night on the news about the importance of kids getting back to school. I don't know where you stand on all of that, but I stand, and I do know this for a fact as a teacher. People don't learn the same from the computer that they do in a classroom. I know that for a fact. You can't learn your fishing just by reading all the material. You need somebody to take you by the hand and show you what that meant, to explain to you in person what that meant. I can almost have you in the boat and explaining it to you and showing you in person, even though it's not in person. It's almost as good. It's better than just reading it. But I figured this, and most of my teacher friends out there, and I have a lot of them, my whole family are teachers, by the way, that if you have 100 kids or 100 people in a room, a portion of those people will learn best from the written word. There'll be another portion that will learn better from the actual demonstration of a situation. And that's why I always thought the on-the-water schools, Bucks on-the-water schools that we did for 20 years up in Manhattan, were so important. And I got people still writing me back 30 years later, changed their fishing life. Catching fish all the time. They actually saw it. They were in the boat. They felt it. They didn't just read about it. So, as I look at the seriousness of so many people that have perished from this pandemic, so many people who got sick, it was just another reminder, in a way, of our time on this earth is limited. And I want the young fishermen to have a place to go to learn. For the people who really want to learn, I want them to have a place where they can learn. But I want it to be all-inclusive. So I put together this daily fishing guide ebook, which is now available. Allie will be sharing more with you about it. Actually, I can tell you, if you want a copy of that, be able to download it, you just need to send me an email at dondicksonfishing@gmail.com and request it. She'll send you the deal, and that'll be that. So, that being said, I've got a written form of what you need to do to become more successful right away. The shortcut, so to speak, if there is such a thing. And then I want to have the visual to coincide with the written, to be able to show you what I meant when I said something in the daily guide. So at the end of putting all of the on-the-water tapes together, along with the daily guide, I feel like I will have at least done my job with something that could be, especially thanks to the 4K cameras and all that today, something that could be lasting 50 years, still available. People could go in and look at it and understand it long after I'm gone. So with that in mind, I want everybody to know, even though that we've hit a real mess this year, and we basically have messed up the entire season, I'm going to be making those on the water videos. That's a promise that I made to you, and I'm going to fulfill it. And it's going to be a bunch of videos. It's going to be not just one or two or three, how to cast, how to troll. It's not going to be that. It's going to be a complete education of what you need to be doing in the boat, and more importantly, not this is what you need to be doing, but why you're doing it, why you have to do it, or you won't have success. So with all that being said, thank you so much for being with me again. I enjoyed having a chance to talk to you, and be sure to tell all of your friends to subscribe to our channel if they haven't already done it. Appreciate it, and we'll see you the next time.